everyone. Welcome to Rancho Los Cerritos' creation station for January, our very first one of 2021. I'm very excited that you're here with me, and we're going to make a couple of crafts that fit the theme Winter Wonderland. So when I think Winter Wonderland, I think snow. So even though it doesn't snow here, again, we're going to bring some snow into our homes and create this snowflake art using Q-tips to create the snowflake pattern. And also in winter time, the nights are very long. It gets dark early. And so to me, that makes me want to bring some light into my home. So we're also going to make this candle lantern decoration. You can also call it a luminary. So we're decorating paper, and then when you light a candle inside, the light comes out through this. And it looks a little bit like stained glass, or it'll kind of shine through whatever drawing you put on the paper. So to do these crafts, you will need a few materials. So for both of them, you'll need some printer paper. And then you'll also need some cardboard. This is part of a box. Again, like a cereal box works. Any kind of cardboard you have lying around, just to make this base for your snowflakes, so you have something to glue the Q-tips to. So you also need Q-tips and a hole punch. You'll need some kind of jar. You can use any size jar. So this is a smaller one. I use like a mason jar for this one. So you can see that it's a little bit bigger, but really any size jar will work. You do want to use a glass jar because you'll be putting a candle inside, and since candles are going to get hot, you don't want to melt any plastic. If you're using like a little electric candle, which I know some of us have, you can use a plastic jar too. So any size jar that you happen to have around your house. You'll also need some glue, and liquid glue works best for gluing the Q-tips down. You'll also need some markers or colored pencils or crayons or even paint, whatever you have around that you like to work with. Some scotch tape, a candle for your candle holder. I use a ruler, and you'll need some ribbon to hang your snowflake from. And then some things that will help you are a pencil and eraser to draw things out first. And then something to trace for the background for your snowflake. So I have this bowl. I wanted it to be a circle because that is the shape that to me is kind of the most like a snowflake, but really you can use whatever you want. If you want it to be a square, you can find a square thing to trace, or any other shape. So we are actually going to start with this craft. So I'm going to put my snowflake stuff off to the side, and so the main thing you need for this one is a piece of paper. So we're basically just cutting the paper to the right size, decorating it, and taping it around the jar. So pretty straightforward. So with this example, I was kind of inspired by stained glass. So this one, I colored in the entire paper. I did not leave any spaces blank. But really you can do anything with it. So you could just draw a picture. It could be a picture of your family or other things that you think about with winter time. And when you put the paper around and then you light the candle inside the jar, the light comes out. So it'll shine more light through areas that are like blank white, or if it's a lighter color. And then if it has a dark color like black or really dark blue or purple, the light won't get out as much. So then you'll get some contrast and you'll really be able to see those shapes. And so I'll show you what this candle looks like in the dark now. So you can see that the light really comes through, and you can see some of those colors. And they're not quite as bright as they look in like daylight. So you can really see bright pops of color, but you still got that same kind of stained glass effect. So like light coming through that glass. So for this one, I'm gonna do more of like a picture, and then you'll have both of those examples. So I need my jar, and I'm just gonna set the lid off to the side. I actually don't need the lid for this. And I want to cut the paper so that it will wrap around the jar and just overlap a little bit. So you can see I've made the full circle around the jar and I've got this whole flap left over. So I'm just gonna make a mark. I'm leaving it overlapping about an inch or like a thumb width. And I made a mark, and now I've got my mark here. So I'm going to use my ruler and make a line so I know where to cut. Draw that out. So I forgot to say this at the beginning, but if you do need to trim your paper, you will need some scissors. So I've got these and I'm going to trim this extra bit off. I'll just put that off to the side. So now this is the right width to just go around and overlap a little bit. This, you can see, this paper is quite a bit taller than the jar. So it's kind of up to you. I definitely want it to be tall enough to cover the jar so you don't see the jar, but it maybe doesn't need to be quite so tall. With this one, I just left the paper the full height. So my mason jar ends about here, so it's got a little bit of extra height on top of that, but the light will still come through there, so it's really up to you how tall you would like your little lantern to be. So for this one, I'll trim it down a little bit. So if I've got the jar here, I'll do one ruler width taller, and then just trim this down. And for this one, since I'm thinking of doing more of like a picture, I don't really want to have as much of the height. But again, it's totally up to you. It's your vision for what you would like your art to look like. So I've got my shape now. So I am gonna make a little mark here just so I know how much it overlaps, because I don't want to draw anything too important on this edge and then have it get covered up. So now it's time to draw, and I'm going to get my piece of cardboard and put it underneath just so I don't bleed through the paper or go off the edges onto my table. So this is where you can get creative. So for this kind of stained glass look, I just used my ruler and made lines, kind of zigzaggy, all over the place lines. And then I traced over the lines with a black marker and colored all of those spaces that were created in with a colored pencil. So lots of different colors. I think I used pretty much every color in this big box. You can also do a similar stained glass thing where you don't have to make as many lines. If you just make like a doodle squiggle, and then you can trace that with black or a dark color and then fill in the spaces between your squiggle marks. That's another way to create that sort of stained glass effect. And so for that one, that might be something like this. So I'll give you an example. So it's really, and you can have someone else draw the squiggle for you too. Just kind of all over the place, filling up all of the space that there is. So now I've got this cool design, so then I can color in this space one color, this one another one. So you get a lot of those different shapes without having to draw out every single line. So this definitely was quicker, and it still makes a really cool design for that. But I wanted to show you what it will look like if you just draw a picture. So when I think of winter time, I think about going up to the mountains where there's snow. Since it doesn't snow where I live here in Long Beach, it's nice to kind of go on a trip. I won't be doing that this year, but it's something that's nice to do when I am able. So when I think about going up in the snow and staying in a cabin, I think about the cabin itself and then the pine trees that are all around. So that's what I'm gonna focus on. So I'm gonna draw a couple of trees and then the cabin. So depending what you wanna draw, it's really totally up to you. I'm not gonna draw any people, because I find people are a little bit tricky to draw sometimes. So for my cabin, I'm just gonna do kind of a basic house shape. So 2 lines going up are like the walls, and then if you just bring them to a point, that kind of makes the roof. So it's a pretty simple house shape, but it gets the idea across. So I'm gonna do the 2 lines up, and then I'm gonna make this point. And I had a little bit of extra lines, so I'm just gonna erase those. So here's a cabin shape. Can you see it? It's a little house. And then I'm gonna draw, I'm just gonna right now draw a really long triangle for where the trunk of the trees would be. I'm gonna color all of the green parts of the tree in with my markers, so I don't think I need to do all of that with the pencil first. So I've got 1 tree on that side, I'll do 2 trees on this side, 1 really tall one, and then 1 shorter one. And then I think I'm gonna do like a nighttime scene. So I'm gonna put the moon up in the sky, and I'm gonna do a crescent moon, which is the one that's kind of like a C shape. And then some stars. And a lot of times the typical star shape has 5 points, but I just kind of make some little points coming out, and then whatever shape it turns into, it looks enough like a star for me. All right, so what I have is the house for the cabin. I've got spots for trees, and I've got my moon and my stars up in the sky. So now I'm gonna color it in. So that's where I'll add a little more details for the cabin, like a door and some windows, which are just gonna be a rectangle or maybe squares for the windows. And then when it's time to do the trees, I'm just gonna get my green and I'm gonna do lines coming out from the tree trunk. So it'll be like that. And then I'm just gonna do that kind of like in multiple layers. And I do the lines just because with the pine tree, I think of the pine needles. So their leaves are like those really thin needles. And so that doing the lines for the tree kind of reminds me of that. So I'll add those details now, color them in, and then we'll check back in a moment. Now that my drawing is complete, it's time to put it around my jar. And you will want to get rid of any label that's on there. If there's still a little bit of the like sticker goop left behind when you take the label off, that's okay. But because this had a lot of like dark space, like that would have blocked the light in places that I didn't want it to from my picture. That's ready to go. And I kept this side, that very edge, blank because that's going to be covered. So that means that's the side I'm going to tape down first. So I want to make sure that the bottom of my paper is like right along the table. And then I'm going to get my piece of tape. All right. So I taped down this edge. Now I'm just gonna wrap this around and then close it up. So this one you can either tape it right along the edge the same as you did to attach it, or you can make tape loops if you don't want the tape to be seen. I'm not too worried about the tape being seen, but Let me show you. So if you grab a piece of tape and then fold the ends back and overlap them a little bit, it'll make a loop of tape. So if I do that, I'm gonna put it right on the edge. So that the corner won't like peel up. I've got the tape right in the very corner. And then I'm gonna do another loop, so fold those two ends until they overlap. And because my jar, it goes up and then goes inwards, it's gonna be hard to tape something along here because the paper is a little bit out. It's out where the edge is, out here. So I'm just gonna put the tape to be like where the top of this part of the jar would be. So I'm just gonna kind of estimate or eyeball it. So I've got at the kind of two ends, and then I'm gonna put one more loop in the center. And then just wrap it up. And again, if you don't want to do the loops, you can just tape it down like you would tape something normally. And actually, I'm going to put in one more loop at the top because this might kind of flap away since there's some space there. So I'm gonna add this last little loop in at the very top here and then squeeze it. So here we go, my little mountain night scene makes me think of winter is drawn here. So here's what this one looks like lit up in the dark. So there you have it. There's a couple different ways that you can use jars and paper to make a little lantern for your home this winter. And that's our first craft. So I'm gonna set these to the side now, and then we'll move on to our snowflake. So for the snowflake, which as a reminder, looks something like this, you are gonna need some cardboard for the back, something to trace your background shape with, pencil and eraser. You'll need the ribbon later, scissors, glue, and Q-tips, and then the hole punch for later as well. And then whatever you want to use to decorate the back. So I had paper and markers and colored pencils. So pretty much all of the supplies you will be using for this one. So the first thing I'm gonna do is trace this circle onto my cardboard and then cut it out. Right, so now I'm done with this bowl, and I'm gonna put it off to the side so it doesn't clutter up my space. Now I'm gonna cut this circle out. So I have my circle now, and this one, because it's got some markings on both sides, I'm gonna cover it up with paper. If you had like a plain cardboard and you don't wanna add the paper, you don't have to, but since I've got things that I'd really rather cover up, I'm gonna do the paper. So that means I'm gonna do the same thing, trace the circle and then cut it out from the paper too. Now it is time to create the background. And again, you can do whatever background you would like, something that you feel like goes with snowflakes, maybe makes you think of winter, a winter wonderland. If you have glitter, you can use glitter. I would have done that if I had glitter, but what I did was also kind of stained glass inspired. So I just used different shades of blue colored pencil and just kind of made different areas different shades of blue. And so I kind of just did like a line and filled this in and then made a line this way, and then they got kind of towards the center. I think for this one, I'm gonna bring in some of the colors that I used over here. So like those greens of the pine tree, maybe some of the blues from like the night sky. And for this one, I'm gonna use markers and colored pencils. So I'm gonna draw just some kind of swirly shapes, curly cues with, I've got a couple different greens, this blue, and then this kind of turquoise, so it's kind of like green and blue, and then a dark blue. So just gonna make some swirls. So really it's just swirly shapes. If you want to draw like another kind of drawing behind your snowflake, you can do that too. This is just kind of one or two different ways you could do that. So I've used this blue. I'll do this one. All right, so I've added all of my blues and greens, and this is what my circle looks like. Originally, I thought I was gonna color it in with colored pencil to kind of fill in the blank space, but I ended up with not that much blank space, and I actually kind of like it just the way it is. So I'm gonna now work on the snowflake. So again, this part is totally up to you. You can make it something like this or something totally different. I'd love to see what you come up with. So now I'm gonna move on to the Q-tips. So a Q-tip has got this kind of stick in the center and then the two little cotton ball ends. So you can use a Q-tip in a couple different ways. You can use the whole Q-tip and just glue it down. You can cut your Q-tip in half, so then it ends up being shorter and it's got the stick with one cotton ball at one end. So that's another way. You can also just cut the cotton balls off. So then you have now three pieces. You've got just a stick and then the two cotton balls. And so that's pretty much the different shapes you can make. You can obviously cut these to be longer or shorter. You could just cut one cotton ball off and then you have a really long stick with the cotton at one end and then one smaller cotton ball. But these are the basic shapes. Stick with two cottons, stick with one cotton at one end, just the stick or just the cotton. So what I did with this was I just got some Q-tips and kind of laid out a pattern. So I think for this one, I started with just full Q-tips and I did 6. I tried to space them out evenly. Snowflakes are usually pretty symmetrical, meaning no matter which way you cut it, it's like the mirror image, so that it looks the same on both sides. So I started with these and then I kind of filled in with other shapes. For the second one, I think I want to make my center a little like 5-point kind of star with the cotton balls, which means I need to cut a couple more of these. I think I'm going to do some of these half ones in those spaces. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's still 5. So the spaces in between the kind of dots that I put in the center. So this part, again, this is where you get to show your creativity, create something. You might even want to like look up what snowflakes look like in real life when you look at them under a microscope and you can zoom in on them really closely. They've got amazing patterns and shapes in them. So that could be something cool as inspiration if you are not sure where you want to go with it. So now I think I'm gonna use just the stick part to create little pointed stars. So mine's gonna be a very star-like snowflake. And I'm gonna have to cut quite a few of the balls off to get just the sticks. So we'll see you in a moment. All right, so I've got that. So for each point of the star, it needed 2 Q-tips. And since there's 5 points of the star, 2 Q-tips each, it took 10 Q-tips to make that outer part. And it looks like that's taking up a lot of the space. So I might do something with all of these cotton ball parts that I had to cut off to make my star. But I'm gonna wait until I've got this glued down to kind of see what the space looks like. So I'm gonna save those, and now I'm gonna work on gluing these down. So when you have the Q-tip, because these 2 ends kind of bulge out, if you're gluing a whole Q-tip down, you really only need to put glue on the cotton swab part. And even if you have a half one, you can just put glue on this cotton swab, cotton ball, and that will hold it down. The only time you really need to put glue onto the stick part is if it doesn't have the cotton. So for all of these, I'll need to actually put glue along the stick. So I'm going to now glue these on to my background, and then I will check back in to see what I'm gonna do with these, my sort of brainstorming spot over here. All right, so here I've got my star. I will say it's definitely harder to glue down the sticks without the cotton. So the easiest is putting glue on the cotton. But there that is, and that actually filled up a lot of the space. So I'm not sure. This is like 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Do I have 10? I still have these balls, but I think this is actually where I want it. It's gonna start getting really busy, especially because I have that swirly background. So I am going to leave it there. And I did use a Q-tip and dip it into the glue and use that to apply glue to what I wanted to stick down. So that's another way you can do it if you've got some issues with your glue dispenser. So the glue part is finished. So this is gonna take a little while to dry, but I'm gonna show you what the next step is, which is basically just creating the way for it to hang. And it looks like this is kind of my area with the most space, the way that it worked out. So I'm gonna put my hole here using my hole punch. And then I'm gonna cut my ribbon. So it's going to loop, and then I want it to hang for like a couple inches so I can hang it over different things, but then I also want space to put a bow. So I'm gonna cut it a little bit longer. And now thread it through. And because my ribbon is a little thicker, I'm gonna fold it in half in order to get it through my hole. So I've threaded the ribbon through and I'm tying a knot, so it's leaving this loop that's a couple inches long, so I'll be able to hang this. I'm now gonna make a double knot because it's a little easier for me to make a bow when there's a double knot there. And then I'll make a bow, so make a loop, go around it with the other ribbon and tighten it. And that is not the most even bow, but I'll just make the loops even and then I can trim the extra little bit of the tail off. So there is my second snowflake. So here's a couple snowflakes that I made, but really there's each snowflake in the world that's ever fallen is unique. So there's tons of different ways that you can make these. You could even make them smaller. So if you wanted to trace a smaller circle, you could do a smaller one. You just would have to cut your Q-tips down to be a little smaller. Or you could make it even bigger if you've got a bigger shape that you can trace. You can make them as big or as small as you'd like. Now that you've made your crafts, we'd love it if you shared them with us. So if you post them on social media, please tag Rancho Los Cerritos, and I'll add our tags at the bottom. So you can tag us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, or all of them, and use the hashtag RLC Creation Station. I would love to see the cool, great, unique ideas that you come up with for all of these crafts. And we will be having another creation station the first Saturday in February. So I hope that I'll see you back for that. And please enjoy these winter wonderland crafts. I hope they bring some of the wonder of winter into your home. See you next time.